Hello, I'm Sarah Freestone, and I'm going to give some ideas about working creatively with your ensemble or band or group. There's a few ideas that I use from my creative composition work when rehearsing with ensembles or groups, and that's for rehearsing whatever repertoire it is that they're practicing at the time. And it's the idea of taking things away from the page. So, for example, if there's a particular rhythm that's difficult for a section or indeed the whole orchestra, and even if the whole orchestra aren't playing that particular rhythm, get them to play it anyway so that they hear it and they know how it should fit with their parts. But it may be that there's a rhythm that's particularly difficult, and rather than rehearsing it over again, isolating the rhythm and then coming away from the page and asking the players to just pick their own note. So they're not going to be playing the same note, just random notes, which will create a brand new chord of whatever it may be. So they've all got their own voice within the chord, and they're not looking at the music, which is harder than it sounds because we're very trained, if we're using music, to be staring at the music. So not to look at the music, to look at you, the ensemble leader, or to look around to other players, not just in their section, but around the whole orchestra with a bit of eye contact. And the idea is that they can then focus entirely on that rhythm out of context and maybe listen a bit more to how the wind players play it or the brass players play it or the string or the percussion, and maybe really hone in and then revisiting the music on the page with the right notes. Another idea that I use a lot in both creative composition and when rehearsing with groups is to really lock in for ensemble skills to the feeling of an internal pulse. As a really easy exercise to do, away from instruments first, so that nothing gets in the way, and just clapping. And just clapping on the first of every 4 counts. And within the 4 counts, to describe the beat as not just a vertical beat, but a horizontal beat, a big amount of time, and to fill in that time as much as possible in order to get the ensemble really together at the very front of the beat. So tick, 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 and clapping the first of every 4, tick, 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 and saying out loud whatever the rhythm is that they're feeling. It might just be the subdivision. I'm very boring, so that's what I do. But it might be something more interesting, creating their own rhythm within that. And then after a while, to stop the subdividing, no tapping of feet, no physical manifestation of the pulse at all, and closing of eyes. And then just so that everyone has the rhythm internally, the meter, the internal beat. And then you can extend that to 8 beats and 12 counts and 16 counts. And I had one group going up to 32. After 32, it gets a bit messy. But once that's established, that feeling of internal rhythm, then to try it with instruments, playing, again, any note, any random note, so you get a brand new chord. And then what has to be taken into account by the players is the preparation, the breath, the subdivision, and how it feels when they've got an instrument in their hands. The advantage of doing it away from the instrument is it manifests itself physically. And when you've spoken about it, if you use whatever it is, how you subdivide, you could have an interesting rhythm as well. I just tick, 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 filling in the gaps. That whenever you're rehearsing a piece where you want everyone to lock in together, and maybe it's rushing, which happens, all you need to say is the tick, 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 and then the players already know what that should feel like, and hopefully they can lock straight into that subdivision and tighten up the rhythm without having to rehearse one bit over and over again. If you'd like to take your ensemble to the next stage of creating an original piece of music together as a group, there's a few really simple ways that you can get them making new music, and I'll show you some of those now. So to start your group creating their own music, there are a few really simple ways to structure it so that they feel comfortable making choices about what it is they're doing. Numbers are a really good way to start. Selecting random numbers, you could just ask people to pick numbers between 1 and 10 or 2 and 7 or whatever it may be, or you might want to have a look around the group and count how many people are wearing shoes with laces, or how many people were born in the first half of the year, whatever it may be, to get you some random numbers. And then numbers can be used for all sorts of things. So I'm going to pick, I don't know, 2, 7, 3 and 1. They're my numbers. So thinking rhythmically, what we could do is have a repeated pattern, 2, 7, 3 and 1, where you're playing on the first of those numbers. So you'd be playing 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, etc. So if you ask your players to pick any note they like on their instrument, or you could specify. So we'll just have a crunchy chord like that, and you could have them playing on the first of the number with the rests in between. So it would sound like this: 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. And you could change the chord around maybe. You could have someone playing all the way through to keep the time. And what that does is it gets everyone counting, listening, and really importantly, away from the music. So no one's glued to the music with all the pitfalls that can bring. So they're just focusing on ensemble skills and playing together. And you can get really fussy about the articulation of it. And something like that can then be applied when you revisit repertoire that you're doing. These numbers might also give you a melody. So if we take, only because I'm at the piano, C as 1, but obviously depending on what instruments you have, C may not well be the best key. So if C is 1, 2 will be D, 7, 3, 1. That's quite nice. And then you could maybe have a discussion about, do we like those notes? Do we want to change where they are? So, sorry. That's if I've moved the 7 down. Or do we want to keep? And then what do we do with the tune? We could use it as a sequence going up or down. Etc. We could repeat it, we could play it backwards, we could do all sorts of things, adding rhythm to it. So maybe, and then so what you choose to do with it could be influenced by the repertoire that you're doing or are about to do. Sometimes it's quite nice to play a piece to the group who haven't heard it before, and just asking for responses. How did they see any images in their heads when they were listening to it? Any particular emotions? And then use those words to maybe use in the piece that you're writing to help you develop the piece and to create the right kind of mood that you want. The numbers could also influence the rhythm of the melody, maybe. So as well as being the numbers of the scale that you're using, it could denote how many beats maybe are on each. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2. So that's giving us a rhythm as well. They could be a chord if you put them all together. That's quite nice. Other ways of generating random numbers or notes, you could use dice, you could use a pack of cards and very flamboyantly throw them in the air and then see which ones land face up, and they're the numbers that you're going to use. Creating soundscapes is a nice easy way to get the players to think about what they're creating and to really listen to each other and respond. So maybe asking for a sound using abstract words like an icy sound or a Tuesday note or whatever it may be, and asking them to pick that note and then playing it all together with directions about the dynamics, about the articulation. Do we want the note to start right at the beginning, or do we want it to swell in and grow? And who do we want to hear first? Will the brass players have to wait before they come in? Otherwise, we're going to hear them clearly. You could also practice articulation in different ways using soundscape notes, random notes put together, asking for different bow strokes or different tonguing or different attack. You could maybe divide it up across the orchestra. So instead of bringing everyone in together, moving your hand across the orchestra, and when the hand passes, that's when the players add their notes. And then when you go round again, the players could maybe add different notes and listen more to the people around them and try and fit in harmonically with what they're doing. Another thing I ask the players to do when we're rehearsing standard repertoire, the repertoire that we're practicing at the time, is to move seats. In COVID times, this may be more tricky, but for a first violinist to go and sit with the horns, or for one of the percussionists to come and sit right at the front of the cello section and bring their music and play along. Difficult for percussionists to bring their instruments, maybe, but it gives a real opportunity for them to, as well as understand the distances between players and conductor, also how it sounds from where you are and how it is looking at the rest of the orchestra. I know as string players, we're very often surprised at how much the back of an orchestra relies on looking at the physicality of the playing in order to know where the pulse of the group is, especially over these extra large distances that we're all having to deal with at the moment. And that can be really useful. As well as moving position around the orchestra, I often, if lucky enough to have a large string section or a large wind section, rotate players so they move down the line if they're wind players, and if they're string players they get to sit at the very front or as near to the front as they can, the middle and the very back, which I think is the hardest job to do. So as well as rotating within the orchestra so they get to hear other sections, to rotate within sections as well. And lastly, I do think it's a good idea for everyone, if possible, to have a go at getting up on the podium and having a go at conducting. A, it's a great experience, and B, it does help when standing on the podium to realise just how much you notice when people aren't watching or maybe aren't quite paying enough attention. And I think it can be a bit of a humbling experience, and one that everyone should have a go at anyway. So I hope you are enjoying rehearsals if you are able to get together in the next few weeks or have been able to get together. And I hope some of that may prove useful or, even better, may have given you some ideas about what you could do with your group.